The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just as Olivia Crawford's mare went lame, and she knew with sinking certainty that her carefully planned escape from Cheyenne had just become significantly more complicated. It was September 1877, and the Wyoming territory stretched endless and unforgiving in every direction. Olivia dismounted carefully, her divided riding skirt catching on the saddle horn before she managed to free herself. The mare favored her left foreleg, trembling slightly as Olivia ran gentle hands down the injured limb. No break, thank God, but the swelling around the fetlock meant she would not be riding anywhere for several days at minimum. She glanced back toward the dust cloud, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 days ago, she had walked away from a life of suffocating propriety in Cheyenne, leaving behind her father's expectations and the marriage he had arranged to a banker twice her age. At 22, Olivia had finally gathered the courage to choose her own path, even if that path led into uncertainty. She had planned to reach her aunt's ranch near Rock Springs, where she hoped to find refuge and perhaps a fresh start. Instead, she stood stranded on the open prairie with an injured horse, dwindling supplies, and riders approaching from the direction she had come. The sun beat down mercilessly as she led her limping mare toward a cluster of rocks that offered meager shade. Her canteen was nearly empty, and she had perhaps a day's worth of food remaining. The situation was dire, but Olivia had not come this far to surrender to panic. She tied the mare where she could reach what little grass grew between the stones, and took stock of her situation with as much calm as she could muster. The riders crested the hill about 20 minutes later. 3 men on horseback, moving at an easy pace that suggested they were in no particular hurry. Olivia's hand moved instinctively to the small pistol tucked into her bag, though she knew her skill with firearms was rudimentary at best. Her father had considered shooting unladylike, another item on his long list of prohibitions that had finally driven her to this desperate flight. As the riders drew closer, she realized with some relief that they appeared to be working cowboys rather than the hired men her father might have sent after her. The lead rider sat tall in his saddle, his hat pulled low against the sun. Something about his bearing suggested competence and calm authority. The other 2 men flanked him, younger and more boisterous from the sound of their conversation carrying across the prairie. The lead rider raised his hand in greeting as they approached, signaling his companions to slow. Olivia straightened her shoulders and stepped forward, determined to face whatever came next with dignity. "Afternoon, miss," the man said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was deep and steady, with a hint of southern drawl softened by years in the West. "You appear to be in some difficulty." Now that he was closer, Olivia could see his face beneath the shadow of his hat. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of aged whiskey. A dark beard covered his jaw, neatly trimmed, and despite the dust of travel, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Something about his direct gaze made her feel simultaneously exposed and strangely safe. "My mare has gone lame," Olivia said, lifting her chin. "I can manage." "I do not doubt it," the man replied, and she thought she detected a hint of amusement in his voice. "But the nearest town is Rawlins, about 30 miles east. That is a considerable walk, particularly without water." "I have water," Olivia said, though they both knew her canteen's lightness belied the claim. The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, landing lightly despite his height. He was tall and lean, built like a man accustomed to long days in the saddle. "Name is Matthew Quinn," he said. "These are my associates, Tommy Reid and Jack Sullivan. We work for the Cross T Ranch, about 15 miles north of here." Olivia Crawford, she replied, then immediately regretted giving her real name. If her father's men came asking, Matthew Quinn would be able to point them in her direction. But Matthew simply nodded, as if storing the information away without judgment. Miss Crawford, I do not mean to presume, but a young woman alone on the prairie without adequate provisions is in considerable danger. The nights are getting cold, and there are worse things than cold out here. I told you I can manage, Olivia repeated, but even to her own ears the words sounded hollow. Matthew studied her for a long moment, those amber eyes seeing far too much. I am certain you can, he said quietly, but sometimes the smartest thing a person can do is accept help when it is offered. No shame in that. One of the other riders, Tommy, called out, Boss, we need to get moving if we are going to make the ranch before dark. Matthew ignored him, his attention still on Olivia. We can take you to Rawlins, or you are welcome to come to the Cross T. The owner's wife would be glad of female company, and your mare could rest in our stable until she is sound again. Olivia hesitated. Every instinct warned against trusting strangers, especially men she had just met on the open prairie. But the alternative was remaining here, alone and vulnerable, hoping that rescue would come before disaster did. She looked at Matthew Quinn's steady gaze and made a decision that felt equal parts terrifying and inevitable. The ranch, she said, if it truly is not an imposition. No imposition at all, Matthew assured her. He turned to his companions. Tommy, help Miss Crawford secure her belongings. Jack, take a look at that mare's leg. The younger cowboys moved to comply, and Olivia watched as Matthew walked a small distance away to study the horizon. There was something watchful about him, a constant awareness of his surroundings that spoke of experience. She wondered what had shaped him, what had brought him to this empty stretch of Wyoming territory. Jack examined the mare with capable hands, his touch gentle despite his rough appearance. Swelling but no heat, he announced. Probably just a strain. Few days rest and she should be fine. Can she make it to the ranch? Matthew asked, returning to the group. If we take it slow and she carries no weight, should be all right, Jack replied. Matthew nodded, then began untying something from behind his saddle. Olivia watched as he pulled free a thick woolen blanket, faded blue with red stripes along the edges. It was clearly well used, softened by time and weather. Here, he said, offering it to her. You will ride with me. This will make the saddle more comfortable. Olivia stared at the blanket, recognizing it as the kind cowboys used beneath their saddles, absorbing sweat and providing cushioning during long rides. The gesture was practical, even prosaic, but something about the way Matthew offered it made her throat tighten unexpectedly. It was his blanket, used daily, and he was lending it to her without hesitation. I cannot take your blanket, she protested. You will need it. I have another, Matthew said, though the way Tommy raised an eyebrow suggested this might not be entirely true. Please, it is a small thing. Olivia took the blanket, surprised by its weight and the warmth still clinging to the wool. It smelled of horse and leather and something else, something clean and masculine that made her acutely aware of Matthew Quinn as a man rather than simply a rescuer. Matthew folded the blanket efficiently and secured it to his saddle, then offered his hand to help her mount. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but careful. Olivia settled herself onto the makeshift cushion, acutely conscious of the intimacy of their position. She would be riding pressed against his back, dependent on his skill and strength to reach safety. Hold on, Matthew said simply, swinging up in front of her with easy grace. Olivia wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid muscle beneath his shirt. He clicked to his horse, a powerful bay gelding, and they began moving at a walk. Tommy led Olivia's limping mare, while Jack rode ahead as scout. The afternoon stretched long and hot as they traveled north. Matthew maintained a steady pace, neither rushing nor dawdling, making allowances for the injured mare. Olivia found herself increasingly aware of every point of contact between them, her arms around his middle, her body swaying in rhythm with his as the horse walked, the warmth of his back against her chest. "You were headed to Rock Springs?" Matthew asked after perhaps an hour of silence. Olivia stiffened. "What makes you think that?" "Only settlement of any size west of here," he replied, "though you were traveling light for such a distance." She said nothing, unwilling to explain her circumstances to a stranger. Matthew seemed to sense her reluctance. "Your business is your own," he said easily. "I am simply making conversation to pass the time." "Why did you stop?" Olivia asked instead. "When you saw me, you could have ridden past." She felt him shrug, a slight movement of his shoulders. "Would not have been right leaving you there. Besides, my mother raised me better than that." "Where is your mother now?" The question emerged before Olivia could think better of it, too personal for their brief acquaintance. "Died when I was 15, Matthew said, his voice carefully neutral. "Cholera down in Texas. My father followed her 6 months later. Grief mostly, though the doctor called it heart failure." "I am sorry," Olivia said softly. "Long time ago," Matthew replied, but she heard the old pain beneath the words. "I have been on my own since then, worked my way up from ranch hand to foreman. The Cross T is a good outfit. Owner treats his people fair." "And you enjoy the work?" Olivia asked, genuinely curious. Matthew was quiet for a moment, considering. "I enjoy the honesty of it," he said finally. "Cattle do not lie or scheme or pretend to be something they are not. The land is harsh but fair. You work hard, you survive. Simple as that." Olivia thought of her own life in Cheyenne, the endless social obligations and meaningless conversations, the constant pressure to conform to expectations that felt like a slowly tightening noose. "That sounds remarkably appealing," she murmured. "Running from something?" Matthew asked, his tone carefully non-judgmental. "Running towards something," Olivia corrected, then realized the truth of it. She was not simply fleeing her father's plans. She was seeking a life of her own choosing, whatever that might look like. "Fair enough," Matthew said, and left it at that. The sun was lowering toward the horizon when they finally spotted the Cross T Ranch nestled in a valley between rolling hills. It was larger than Olivia had expected, with a sprawling main house, several outbuildings, and extensive corrals. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures, and she could see riders moving among them in the distance. As they entered the ranch yard, a woman emerged from the main house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40, with graying blonde hair and a capable, friendly face that immediately put Olivia at ease. "Matthew Quinn, what have you brought home now?" the woman called, her voice rich with affectionate exasperation. Matthew dismounted and helped Olivia down, his hands steady at her waist. "Miss Olivia Crawford, this is Mrs. Sarah Bennett, wife of the ranch owner. Sarah, Miss Crawford's horse went lame out on the prairie. I hoped you might extend your hospitality for a few days while the mare recovers." Sarah's sharp eyes took in Olivia's divided skirt, her dusty clothes, and the careful way she held herself. "Of course," she said warmly. "Any friend of Matthew's is welcome here. Come inside, dear. You must be exhausted." "Thank you," Olivia said, meaning it. The relief of reaching safety made her suddenly aware of just how tired she was, how frightened she had been despite her brave words. "Tommy, see to Miss Crawford's horse," Matthew directed. "Give her the second stall in the main barn, plenty of bedding and double rations of grain. Jack, you can head back out to the herd. Tell Ben I will be there within the hour." The younger cowboys moved to obey, and Matthew turned to Olivia. She was struck again by his steady gaze, the sense that he saw more than she wanted to reveal. "You will be safe here," he said quietly. "Sarah will take good care of you." "Thank you," Olivia said, and the words felt inadequate for what he had done. For stopping, for the blanket, for everything. Matthew touched his hat brim, that same gesture he had used when they first met. "Get some rest, Miss Crawford. We can talk more tomorrow." He strode away toward the corrals, moving with that easy confidence Olivia was beginning to recognize as characteristic. Sarah took her arm gently and led her toward the house. "That man," Sarah said, shaking her head with a smile, "is going to marry some lucky woman one of these days and make her the happiest wife in Wyoming. Heart as big as the territory, though he does his best to hide it." Olivia said nothing, but she felt her cheeks warm in a way that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. The Bennett house was comfortable and well-maintained, with the solid furniture and practical decoration of a working ranch. Sarah showed Olivia to a small guest room with a real bed, a luxury after 3 nights of sleeping on the ground, and promised hot water for washing. "Supper is at 6, Sarah said. "The men eat in the bunkhouse, but you are welcome to join Mr. Bennett and myself in the dining room. Or I can bring something to your room if you prefer." "The dining room would be lovely," Olivia said, meaning it. After days alone, human company sounded wonderful, even if exhaustion made her bones ache. Sarah patted her hand. "Rest now. I will wake you in plenty of time." Olivia sank onto the bed after Sarah left, feeling the knots in her shoulders begin to loosen. She had made it. Perhaps not to her original destination, but to safety nonetheless. And tomorrow she would figure out her next move. She looked down at her hands, still slightly grimy with trail dust, and thought of Matthew Quinn's calloused palm, the way he had offered his saddle blanket without hesitation. She barely knew the man, yet something about him had awakened a curiosity she had never felt toward any of the suitable young men in Cheyenne. Perhaps it was simply gratitude, she told herself, or relief at being rescued. But lying there in the quiet room as the afternoon light slanted through the window, Olivia knew it was more than that. Something had passed between them on that dusty prairie, something she did not yet have words to name. She found herself hoping she would see Matthew Quinn at supper, hoping for another chance to hear his quiet voice and meet his steady amber gaze. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "You barely escaped one man's expectations. Do not go tumbling into another entanglement before you have even caught your breath." But when she finally dozed off, she dreamed of calloused hands and the smell of leather, of amber eyes that saw too much and judged too little. Olivia woke to the sound of voices outside her window and the rich smell of cooking meat. For a moment she was disoriented, unsure where she was, then memory returned in a rush. The Cross T Ranch. Matthew Quinn. Safety, at least for now. She washed her face and hands in the basin Sarah had provided, grateful for the soap that actually produced a decent lather. Her reflection in the small mirror showed a young woman with dark hair escaping its pins and tired green eyes. She looked older than she had 3 days ago, she thought. The prairie had a way of stripping away pretense, leaving only what was essential. A soft knock at the door announced Sarah. "Feel better, dear. Supper will be ready in 10 minutes. Olivia followed her hostess to a dining room that managed to feel both practical and welcoming. Heavy wooden furniture stood on polished floors, and curtains softened the windows without sacrificing light. A man rose from the table as they entered, tall and gray-haired with the weathered face of someone who had spent his life outdoors. "Charles Bennett," he said, offering his hand. "Welcome to the Cross T, Miss Crawford." His handshake was firm but brief, and Olivia liked him immediately. There was no condescension in his manner, no assumption that she required protection or pity. He simply welcomed her as a guest and left it at that. "Thank you for your hospitality," Olivia said as they settled at the table. "I hope I am not imposing." "Not at all," Charles said. "Always glad to help a traveler. Matthew says your mare should be sound in a few days." The food was simple but abundant. Roasted beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from Sarah's garden. Olivia ate with an appetite sharpened by days of trail rations, and the Bennets kept up a comfortable flow of conversation that required only occasional responses from her. "How long have you been foreman?" Olivia asked Charles, curious about the man who had earned Matthew Quinn's loyalty. 5 years, Charles replied. "Best decision I ever made hiring Matthew. He knows cattle, knows horses, and most importantly, he knows men. Gets more work out of the hands through respect than most foremen manage with threats and bluster." "He was very kind," Olivia said carefully, "stopping to help me." Sarah and Charles exchanged a glance Olivia could not quite interpret. "Matthew has a strong sense of what is right," Sarah said. "Sometimes to his own detriment. He has turned down better-paying positions because he gave his word to stay here." "Loyalty is rare," Olivia observed. "Indeed," Charles agreed, "which is why I value it so highly when I find it." After supper, Sarah invited Olivia to sit on the porch and enjoy the evening air. The sun had set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the temperature had dropped to something almost comfortable. In the distance, Olivia could hear cattle lowing and the occasional shout from the bunkhouse. "How long were you planning to travel alone?" Sarah asked quietly. Olivia considered lying, then decided these people deserved at least some honesty. "To Rock Springs. I have an aunt there who runs a boarding house. I was hoping she might take me in, let me help with the business. And your family in Cheyenne?" Sarah's voice was gentle but probing. "My father," Olivia said carefully. "My mother died when I was young. He is a good man in his way, but we have different ideas about how I should live my life." Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I ran away from Boston when I was not much younger than you," she said. "My parents wanted me to marry a banker. I wanted adventure. Charles found me trying to sign on with a wagon train, talked the wagon master into letting me join as a cook. We were married 6 months later." "Do you regret it?" Olivia asked. "Not for a single day," Sarah said firmly. "Life out here is hard, but it is honest. I chose this, and that makes all the difference." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Then Olivia saw a figure approaching from the direction of the corrals, tall and purposeful. Her heart kicked in her chest before her mind fully registered who it was. Matthew Quinn climbed the porch steps, removing his hat as he did. "Evening, Sarah, Miss Crawford." "Matthew," Sarah said with a knowing smile. "Come to report on the mare, among other things," Matthew replied. "She ate well and is resting comfortably. Should be sound enough for light riding in 4 or 5 days." "Thank you for taking such good care of her," Olivia said. Matthew looked at her directly, and even in the dim light she felt the impact of his gaze. "It is no trouble. I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. Sarah and Mr. Bennet have been very generous," Olivia assured him. "Good." Matthew turned his hat in his hands, a gesture that seemed uncharacteristically uncertain. "I also wanted to say, Miss Crawford, that if you need to send word to anyone about your situation, I would be happy to ride to Rawlins tomorrow. The telegraph office there could reach Cheyenne or Rock Springs, or anywhere else you might need." Olivia felt her stomach tighten. Of course he had guessed she was running from something. His offer was generous, but also a gentle reminder that her presence here raised questions. "That is very thoughtful," she said carefully. but I do not think that will be necessary. My aunt is not expecting me at any particular time." Matthew nodded, accepting this at face value even though they both knew she was evading. "The offer stands if you change your mind." "Matthew, sit down for heaven's sake," Sarah said. "You are making me nervous with all that hovering. Would you like some coffee?" "I should get back to the bunkhouse," Matthew said, but he did sit, lowering himself onto the porch rail with easy grace. Sarah disappeared inside, returning moments later with 3 cups of coffee. The bitter, strong brew was exactly what Olivia needed, warming her from within as the night air grew cooler. "Tell me about the ranch," Olivia said, wanting to keep Matthew talking, wanting to learn more about this quiet man who had rescued her. "How many cattle do you run?" Matthew's face relaxed as he talked about the work he loved, explaining the rhythms of ranch life, the challenges of managing several hundred head of cattle across thousands of acres. He spoke with competence and genuine affection for the animals in his care, describing individual steers by their markings and personalities. "You really love this life," Olivia observed. "I do," Matthew admitted. "There is something about working with the land and the animals that makes sense to me. Clear cause and effect. You put in the work, you see the results." "Unlike people," Olivia said. "Unlike people," Matthew agreed with a slight smile. "Though I suppose people can be predictable too in their own way. Most folks respond well to fair treatment and honesty." "You make it sound simple," Olivia said. "Maybe it is, and we just complicate it unnecessarily," Matthew replied. Sarah chuckled. "Matthew Quinn, philosopher cowboy." "Who would have thought?" Matthew's smile widened, transforming his serious face into something warmer and more open. Olivia felt her breath catch slightly at the sight. "I contain multitudes," he said with mock solemnity. They talked until the night grew late and cold, Sarah eventually excusing herself to prepare for bed. Olivia knew she should follow, but something kept her on the porch with Matthew, reluctant to break the easy companionship that had developed. "I should let you rest," Matthew said finally, rising from the rail. "Tomorrow will be a long day." "What will you be doing?" Olivia asked. "Moving a herd to fresh pasture," Matthew said. "Nothing exciting, just the regular work." "It sounds exciting to me," Olivia said honestly. "I have spent my whole life in Cheyenne, following social rules that seem increasingly meaningless. The idea of work that matters, that produces something tangible, sounds wonderful." Matthew studied her in the darkness, his expression thoughtful. "You could ride out with us tomorrow if you like," he said. "See what ranch work actually entails. It might be less romantic than you imagine." "I would like that very much," Olivia said, pleased by the invitation. "Can you ride well enough?" Matthew asked. "It will be a long day in the saddle." "I can ride," Olivia assured him. "My father might disapprove of many things, but he did ensure I had good instruction in horsemanship." "Then we leave at dawn," Matthew said. "Sarah can lend you something more practical to wear. That divided skirt is better than most, but you will want real riding gear for this." "Thank you," Olivia said, meaning it deeply. "For everything. I know I have not been entirely forthcoming about my circumstances, and you have every right to demand answers. But you have not, and I appreciate that more than I can say." Matthew settled his hat back on his head, his face once again shadowed. "Everyone has a right to their privacy," he said quietly. "When you want to talk, I will listen. Until then, your business is your own." He touched his hat brim in that habitual gesture and strode away into the darkness, leaving Olivia standing on the porch with her heart beating faster than the cool night air warranted. She dreamed that night of amber eyes and calloused hands, of open spaces and honest work, of a life entirely different from the one she had known. When Sarah woke her before dawn, Olivia rose with an eagerness she had not felt in years. The riding clothes Sarah provided were practical and well-worn. Heavy canvas pants that had belonged to the Bennetts' grown son, a sturdy shirt, and a vest that actually had useful pockets. Olivia braided her dark hair tightly and covered it with a borrowed hat, feeling more herself than she had in her expensive Cheyenne wardrobe. Matthew was waiting in the yard with 2 horses saddled and ready. The rising sun painted the clouds gold and pink, and the air held that crystalline quality peculiar to high desert mornings. He looked her over with approval. "You will do," he said simply, offering her the reins to a sturdy sorrel mare. "This is Molly. She is steady and smart. Trust her, and she will take care of you." Olivia mounted smoothly, grateful for all those riding lessons her father had insisted upon. Matthew swung onto his bay, gelding with that easy grace she was beginning to recognize as characteristic, and they rode out together as the sun cleared the horizon. The other ranch hands were already moving the herd when they arrived, their shouts and whistles carrying across the prairie. Matthew positioned Olivia on the edge of the operation where she could observe without being in danger, then rode to join his men. Watching him work was a revelation. Matthew moved among the cattle with absolute confidence, his horse responding to the slightest cues as they turned strays back toward the herd. He worked in harmony with his men, directing them with hand signals and occasional shouted instructions, maintaining order in what could easily have become chaos. The morning wore on, hot and dusty, and exhausting even from Olivia's relatively safe position. She watched Matthew work, noting how the other cowboys deferred to him not from fear but from genuine respect. He praised good work immediately and corrected mistakes without harsh words, maintaining discipline through example rather than intimidation. Around noon, the herd reached their destination, a broad pasture with good grass and a creek running through it. The cowboys let the cattle spread out to graze, and Matthew rode back to where Olivia waited. "What do you think?" he asked, pulling off his hat to wipe sweat from his forehead. "Still romantic. It is hard work," Olivia admitted. "But yes, there is something deeply satisfying about watching you all work together toward a common goal. Everyone knows their role, everyone contributes. Not so different from your social gatherings in Cheyenne," Matthew observed. "Just more honest about what we are doing," Olivia laughed, surprised by his insight. "You are right. I had not thought of it that way, but you are absolutely correct. At least here, people say what they mean." They ate lunch in the shade of a cottonwood tree, sharing the food Sarah had packed. The other hands kept a respectful distance, giving Matthew and Olivia space. She wondered what they thought of her presence, whether they speculated about her relationship with their foreman. "Thank you for letting me come today," Olivia said. "I've learned more in one morning than I could have imagined." "What have you learned?" Matthew asked, genuinely curious. Olivia considered the question seriously. "That work can be meaningful, that leadership is about respect rather than power, that the land rewards honest effort." She paused, then added more quietly, "that I want a life where I contribute something real, not just ornamental." Matthew was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes studying her with that too perceptive gaze. "You are running from an arranged marriage," he said finally, not a question. Olivia saw no point in denying it. "My father wants me to marry a banker named Herbert Olson. He is 45, twice widowed, and interested in my father's social connections more than in me. I tried to be dutiful. I truly did. But I could not face a lifetime of being treated as a valuable asset rather than a person." "So you left," Matthew said. "So I left," Olivia confirmed. "I have an aunt in Rock Springs who might take me in, though we have never been close." Beyond that, I have no real plan. Just a desperate need to choose my own path, whatever that might be." "That took courage," Matthew said quietly. "Or foolishness," Olivia replied. "I had no real idea what I was doing. If you had not come along when you did, I would have been in serious trouble." "But I did come along," Matthew pointed out. "Sometimes things work out." "Do you believe in fate?" Olivia asked, curious about this man who seemed so grounded in the practical. Matthew thought about it. "I believe in making good choices and accepting the consequences. But I also believe that sometimes people come into our lives at exactly the right moment. Whether you call that fate or coincidence or the will of God, I am not sure it matters." "And you think I came into your life at the right moment?" Olivia asked, her heart beating faster. Matthew met her eyes directly. "I think you are brave and smart and more capable than you know. I think you deserve a chance to find out who you are without someone else's expectations weighing you down. And I think I am glad I was the one who found you on that prairie." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Olivia was acutely aware of every detail. The dappled shade, the distant lowing of cattle, the way Matthew's hat sat pushed back on his head, revealing more of his face than usual. She wanted to lean closer, wanted to close the distance between them, wanted things she had no right to want from a man she had known barely 24 hours. "We should head back," Matthew said, breaking the spell. "The afternoon work will be lighter, but I want to check on your mare." They rode back to the ranch in comfortable silence, Olivia's mind churning with thoughts and feelings she could not quite sort out. She barely knew Matthew Quinn, yet something about him called to her in a way she had never experienced. Perhaps it was simply gratitude, she told herself again. Or the appeal of the forbidden after a lifetime of rigid propriety. But watching him move through his world with such quiet competence, Olivia suspected it was more than that. Matthew Quinn was everything the men in her social circle were not: honest, capable, uninterested in appearances or pretense. He treated her as an equal, respected her choices even when they led to danger. With him, she felt seen in a way she never had before. The question was what to do about it. She had just escaped one man's expectations. It would be foolish to immediately tumble into another entanglement, particularly with someone she barely knew. The sensible thing would be to wait for her mare to heal, thank the Bennetts for their hospitality, and continue to her aunt's boarding house in Rock Springs. But as they rode back into the cross T yard and Matthew helped her dismount, his hand steady at her waist, Olivia found herself hoping for a reason to stay just a little longer. Over the next 3 days, Olivia fell into the rhythm of ranch life. She helped Sarah with household tasks in the morning, learning to bake bread and churn butter and accomplish the 100 small jobs that kept a working ranch running. In the afternoons, she visited her mare, whose leg was healing well, and sometimes rode out with Matthew to observe the ranch operations. Matthew was a patient teacher, explaining the intricacies of cattle management and ranch economics with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. Olivia found herself fascinated not just by the work itself, but by the way Matthew approached it, the careful balance of planning and adaptation that successful ranching required. They talked about everything during those rides: her life in Cheyenne and his years moving from ranch to ranch across the West, her frustrated ambitions and his hard-won contentment, their different but equally strong desire for honest work and authentic connection. With every conversation, Olivia felt herself drawn deeper into something she did not fully understand, but could not resist. On the 4th evening, Charles Bennett asked Matthew to join them for supper in the main house. Olivia felt her pulse quicken when Matthew entered the dining room, freshly washed and dressed in clean clothes, his dark hair still damp from bathing. "Your mare is nearly sound," Charles said as they ate. "Another day or two and she should be able to make the journey to Rock Springs." "That is good news," Olivia said and tried to mean it. "Unless you would prefer to stay longer," Sarah said, her eyes twinkling. "We have certainly enjoyed having you here." "I could not presume," Olivia began, but Charles waved away her objection. "No presumption at all. In fact, I wanted to make you a proposal." He glanced at Matthew, who was studying his plate with unusual intensity. "Sarah could use help with the household management, particularly during calving season when we have extra hands to feed. If you were interested, we could offer you employment. Room, board, and a small wage. Nothing fancy but honest work." Olivia's heart leaped. "You would hire me to work on the ranch?" "I would hire you to help manage the household," Charles clarified. "Sarah handles an enormous workload, and it would be good for her to have reliable assistance." "You strike me as capable and hardworking. If you are interested in staying, the position is yours." Olivia looked at Sarah, who was beaming. "I told Charles we should make the offer," Sarah said. "You fit here, dear. Some people do and some do not, and you definitely do. But what about my aunt?" Olivia said, her mind racing. "I should at least send word that I am safe." "We can arrange that," Matthew said, speaking for the first time. His voice was carefully neutral, but when Olivia met his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. "I will ride to Rawlins tomorrow and send a telegram to your aunt. You can let her know you have found employment and will contact her again soon." "Unless you would rather continue to Rock Springs," Charles said, misreading her hesitation. "We do not want to pressure you." "No," Olivia said quickly. "No, I would very much like to stay. Thank you both. This is more than I could have hoped for." Sarah clapped her hands together. "Wonderful. Oh, this will be such a help, Olivia, and it will be lovely to have another woman around. This place can feel very male sometimes." They spent the rest of the meal discussing practical arrangements. Olivia's wages, her duties, the rhythm of the household work. But beneath the prosaic conversation, Olivia was intensely aware of Matthew sitting across from her, his expression carefully controlled but his eyes warm when they met hers. After supper, she found him on the porch again, staring out at the darkened prairie. She joined him without speaking, standing close enough to feel his warmth but not touching. "Are you sure about this?" Matthew asked quietly. "Staying here, I mean. It is not what you planned." "Plans change," Olivia replied. "This feels right in a way that traveling to Rock Springs never quite did." "Your father might find you here," Matthew pointed out. "If he sends people looking, the Cross T is not exactly hidden." "I know," Olivia said, "but I have to start living my own life sometime. I cannot spend forever running and hiding." Matthew turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "If he comes or if he sends men, I will stand with you. Charles will too. We protect our own here." The simple declaration made Olivia's throat tight with emotion. "I barely know you," she said. "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Matthew was quiet for a long moment, his amber eyes searching her face in the moonlight. "Because some things are worth the risk," he said finally. "Because you deserve to live your own life, and because I find I do not like the idea of you leaving." Olivia's heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Matthew, I cannot afford complications right now. I have only just escaped one set of obligations. I need time to figure out who I am, what I want." "I know," Matthew said. "I am not asking for anything, Olivia. I am just telling you the truth. You affect me. Being around you makes me think about things I put aside years ago, dreams I decided were not practical for a ranch foreman with no prospects beyond his monthly wages." "What dreams?" Olivia whispered. "A home of my own. A partnership with someone who understands this life. Children maybe someday." He shook his head slightly. Foolish things for a man in my position to contemplate." "They are not foolish," Olivia said fiercely. "They are normal and human and good. Why should you not have those things?" "Because wanting them does not make them possible," Matthew replied. "Because I make $40 a month and own little more than my horse and saddle. Because building a life takes more than just desire." "But you have skills," Olivia protested. "Experience, reputation. Surely you could save money, buy land eventually." "Eventually," Matthew agreed. "Maybe in 10 years if I am lucky and careful. That is a long time to ask someone to wait." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Olivia understood what he was not quite saying, that he was interested in her but saw no practical path forward, that his feelings were constrained by economic reality. "I am not going anywhere," Olivia said softly. "I will be right here, working alongside Sarah, learning about ranch life." "We have time, Matthew. We do not have to figure everything out tonight." Matthew smiled, a real smile that transformed his serious face. "That is remarkably sensible." "Occasionally I have good ideas," Olivia said, smiling back. They stood together in the darkness, not touching but connected nonetheless, until the cold drove them inside. Olivia went to bed that night feeling more hopeful than she had in months. She had found work, a place where she fit, people who valued her for herself rather than her social connections. And she had found Matthew Quinn, whose quiet strength and honest heart called to something deep within her. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, that uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. The weeks that followed settled into a pleasant routine. Olivia worked alongside Sarah, learning the intricacies of household management on a working ranch. She baked bread and preserved vegetables, mended clothes and kept accounts, managed the endless stream of laundry generated by 24 cowboys. The work was physically demanding but deeply satisfying, producing tangible results she could see and touch. Matthew had sent the telegram to her aunt, who replied with terse approval of Olivia's employment and a promise not to reveal her location if asked. Whether her father was searching remained unknown, but as days turned to weeks with no sign of pursuit, Olivia began to relax slightly. She saw Matthew daily, sometimes just in passing as he coordinated ranch operations, sometimes for longer conversations over meals or in the evening. They were careful around each other, maintaining a respectful distance while the attraction between them grew stronger. Olivia caught herself watching for him, listening for his voice, finding excuses to be wherever he was working. The other ranch hands noticed, of course. Cowboys missed nothing, and the knowing glances exchanged among the men whenever Matthew and Olivia were together made her face burn. But they were respectful in their teasing, clearly fond of their foreman and pleased to see him interested in someone. About time, Matthew found himself a good woman, Tommy said one afternoon when Olivia brought lunch to the crew working on fence repairs. "Man works too hard and plays not at all. Needs someone to remind him there is more to life than cattle." "We are just friends," Olivia protested, though the words felt hollow even to her. "Sure you are," Jack agreed with a grin. "Just friends who happen to look at each other like the sun rises and sets on the other person, totally platonic." "Leave her alone," Matthew said, though Olivia noticed he did not actually deny the accusation. "Some of us have work to do, even if you two seem to have forgotten what that looks like." The younger cowboys returned to their posts still grinning, and Matthew shook his head ruefully. "Sorry about them. They mean well, but subtlety is not their strong suit." "It is all right," Olivia said. "They are happy for you." "Nothing to be happy about yet," Matthew pointed out, but his eyes were warm. "Yet," Olivia repeated softly, and watched Matthew's expression shift to something that made her pulse race. September gave way to October, and the Wyoming weather turned colder. The ranch work intensified as they prepared for winter, moving cattle to protected valleys, storing feed, winterizing buildings. Olivia found herself working harder than she ever had in Cheyenne, falling into bed each night exhausted but content. One crisp morning in late October, Charles called Matthew to the main house. Olivia was working in the kitchen with Sarah when the two men entered, their expressions grave. "Rider came from town," Charles said without preamble. "Man from Cheyenne asking questions about a young woman traveling alone. Dark hair, green eyes, around 22 years old." Olivia felt her stomach drop. "My father, or someone working for him," Charles agreed. "The rider sent him north, said he heard talk of a woman matching that description headed toward Montana. Bought us some time, but if your father is determined, he will eventually find his way here." "I should leave," Olivia said immediately. "I've put you all at risk enough already." "You will do no such thing," Sarah said firmly. "You are part of this household now. We do not abandon our own at the first sign of trouble." "But my father is a powerful man in Cheyenne," Olivia protested. "He has connections, resources. He could make things very difficult for you." "Let him try," Charles said calmly. "This is Wyoming territory, not some eastern city where money and social position trump everything. Out here, a man's word and his character count for more than his bank account. If your father comes here making trouble, he will find himself without much sympathy." "Besides," Matthew said, speaking for the first time, "you are legally an adult. Even if your father finds you, he cannot force you to return to Cheyenne or marry against your will. The most he can do is try to persuade you, and we can make sure you have support if that happens." Olivia looked around at these people who had become so important to her in such a short time. Sarah's determined face, Charles's steady calm, Matthew's quiet strength. They were offering to stand between her and her father's expectations, asking nothing in return. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk so much for me?" "Because it is right," Sarah said simply. "Because you deserve to live your own life, and because you have become part of our family, whether you intended to or not." The words made Olivia's eyes sting with unshed tears. Family. She had never felt truly part of her father's world, always aware that she existed to fulfill his ambitions rather than for her own sake. But here, with these people, she felt valued for who she was rather than what she represented. "Thank you," she managed. "I do not know what else to say." "Just thank you. Nothing else needed," Charles said. "Now let us discuss practical matters. If your father does come here, we should have a plan." They spent the next hour discussing various scenarios and responses. Matthew suggested that Olivia could temporarily stay with a neighboring ranch family if necessary, putting some distance between herself and the crossed T until the situation resolved. Charles proposed having the ranch's lawyer on standby to explain the legal realities if needed. Sarah simply maintained that no one was taking Olivia anywhere against her will, and that was the end of it. Finally, Charles and Sarah excused themselves to attend to other work, leaving Matthew and Olivia alone in the kitchen. Matthew poured them both coffee and sat across the table from her, his expression serious. "This must be frightening," he said quietly. "It is," Olivia admitted. "Not so much my father himself, but what he represents. He is not a cruel man, Matthew. He genuinely believes he knows what is best for me, but his vision of my life leaves no room for my own choices." "What will you say if he comes?" Matthew asked. Olivia considered the question carefully. "The truth, I suppose. That I will not marry Herbert Olson, that I have found work and purpose here, that I intend to build my own life. He will not be happy, but eventually he will have to accept it." "And if he does not accept it?" Matthew pressed. Then I will deal with that when it happens, Olivia said firmly. I cannot live my life in fear of his disapproval. I have already spent too many years doing exactly that. Matthew reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. Whatever happens, you are not alone. I need you to know that. Olivia looked at their joined hands, feeling the rightness of the connection. Matthew, we have been dancing around this for weeks. I think we need to be honest about what is happening between us. I am not sure honesty is wise right now, Matthew said slowly. Your life is complicated enough without adding a relationship into the mix. My life is always going to be complicated, Olivia pointed out, at least for the foreseeable future, but that does not change how I feel about you. Matthew's grip on her hand tightened. How do you feel? Olivia took a breath, committing to the truth. Like I have been waiting my whole life to meet someone who sees me as I actually am. Like every conversation with you teaches me something new about who I want to be. Like the idea of leaving here, of not seeing you every day, is physically painful. Olivia, Matthew said, his voice rough with emotion. I am not asking for promises or declarations, Olivia continued. I know we have known each other only weeks. I know your concerns about your financial situation are practical ones, but I need you to know that I care about you, deeply. Whatever happens with my father, whatever the future holds, that is the truth. Matthew stood and came around the table, pulling Olivia to her feet. They stood close together, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might escape her chest. I have been trying so hard not to feel this, Matthew said quietly. Trying to be sensible and practical and responsible. But the truth is, I am falling in love with you, Olivia Crawford. Have been since the moment I saw you standing beside that lame mare, stubborn and brave and refusing to admit you were terrified. I was not refusing to admit it, Olivia said, her voice unsteady. I was simply trying not to panic. Matthew smiled. Same thing. Then he was kissing her, gentle and sure, his lips warm against hers. Olivia melted into the embrace, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders as the world narrowed to just this. His mouth on hers, his strong arms around her, the sudden certainty that this was what she had been searching for all along. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Matthew rested his forehead against hers. We should probably be more careful, he said. Sarah or Charles could walk in at any moment. I do not care, Olivia whispered. Let them see. I am tired of hiding how I feel. Olivia, there are still so many practical concerns, Matthew began, but she stopped him with a finger against his lips. I know. Your wages, my uncertain situation, my father's potential arrival, I know all of it. But Matthew, I have spent my entire life being practical and careful and doing what was expected, and it made me miserable. I am not going to waste this, whatever this is between us, because the timing is not perfect. Matthew kissed her again, deeper this time, and Olivia felt the last of his resistance crumble. All right, he said when they parted. All right, we will figure it out together. Together, Olivia agreed, loving the sound of the word. They spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side, no longer careful to maintain distance. Matthew helped Olivia carry water from the well, their hands brushing with each exchange of the bucket. She brought him fresh coffee while he reviewed the ranch ledgers, her hand resting briefly on his shoulder. Small touches, casual intimacies, building connection through 100 tiny moments. Sarah noticed, of course. She said nothing, but the smile she gave Olivia over supper that evening communicated volumes of approval. That night, Olivia lay in bed replaying every moment. The way Matthew's eyes had darkened before he kissed her, the gentle strength of his arms, the rough tenderness of his calloused hands against her face. She felt like she was glowing from within, every nerve alive with possibility. She had come west seeking freedom and found something far more precious. A man who valued her for exactly who she was, whose quiet competence and gentle heart called to her own. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Olivia fell asleep smiling, dreaming of amber eyes and honest work, of a future built on choice rather than obligation. The summons came 3 days later, delivered by a nervous rider from Rawlins. A gentleman from Cheyenne had arrived at the hotel there, making inquiries about his daughter. He requested, politely but firmly, that if Miss Olivia Crawford was at the Cross T Ranch, she should return to town to speak with him at her earliest convenience. Olivia read the message twice, her hands trembling slightly. She had known this moment would come, but that did not make it easier to face. "I have to go," she said quietly. Matthew and the Bennetts had gathered in the kitchen when the rider arrived, and all three were watching her with concern. "If I do not, he will simply come here, and I would rather keep this confrontation away from the ranch." "I am coming with you," Matthew said immediately. "Matthew, that might make things worse," Olivia protested. "My father is conservative in his views about courtship. If he thinks there is something between us, he will use it as evidence that I am behaving irresponsibly." "Let him," Matthew said flatly. "You are not going into that hotel to face him alone. You said yourself he is not cruel, but even well-meaning pressure can be overwhelming. I will stay in the background if you prefer, but I am coming." Olivia looked at his determined face and felt her heart swell. "All right, thank you. I am coming too," Sarah announced. "A woman should have female support in situations like this. Besides, your father might think twice about making a scene if there are witnesses." Charles nodded his agreement. "Take the good buggy. It is more comfortable than riding, and appearances matter with men like your father. Matthew, you drive. Show him that Olivia has respectable friends looking out for her interests." They left early the next morning, the three of them crowded onto the buggy's bench seat. The drive to Rawlins took most of the day, giving Olivia plenty of time to rehearse various arguments in her mind. But every imagined conversation ended the same way, with her refusing to return to Cheyenne or marry Herbert Olson, and her father's inevitable disappointment. "Stop worrying," Matthew said quietly, sensing her tension. "You know what you want. Stand firm on that and the rest will work itself out." "What if he threatens to cut me off completely?" Olivia asked. "No money, no family support, nothing." "Then you have what you already have right now," Sarah pointed out. "A job, friends, a place to live. You have been managing without his support for 2 months. You can continue to do so if necessary." "But forever," Olivia whispered. "Never speaking to my father again, never having that relationship." "That is his choice to make," Matthew said firmly. "Not yours. You are choosing to live your own life. If he decides that is unforgivable, that is on him, not you." The words helped, but Olivia's stomach remained knotted with anxiety as they rolled into Rawlins. The town was larger than she had expected, with several streets of businesses and homes spreading out from the railroad depot. Matthew drove directly to the Ferris Hotel, the finest establishment in town, and helped both women down from the buggy. "You want us to come in with you?" he asked Olivia. She took a breath, steadying herself. "Wait here for now. If I need you, I will send word. But I should at least try to handle this myself first." Matthew looked like he wanted to argue but nodded instead. "We will be right here." The hotel lobby was well appointed, with leather furniture and polished wood floors. Olivia asked the desk clerk for her father's room number and climbed the stairs with feet that felt leaden. She stood outside room 12 for a long moment, gathering courage, then knocked firmly. "Come in." Her father's voice was exactly as she remembered. deep, cultured, laced with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Olivia opened the door and stepped inside. Richard Crawford stood by the window, his back to the door, hands clasped behind him. He was a tall man, still handsome at 52, with silver threading through his dark hair. He did not turn immediately when she entered, and Olivia wondered if he was composing himself or simply making a point. "Hello, father," she said quietly. Richard turned then, his face carefully controlled. "Olivia, I am relieved to see you safe. When you disappeared, I feared the worst." "I left you a note," Olivia pointed out. "A note," Richard repeated, investing the word with layers of reproach. "4 lines saying you would not marry Herbert and were leaving to make your own way. That is all the explanation you thought I deserved after 22 years. What else was there to say?" Olivia asked. "We had discussed it dozens of times. You knew how I felt about the marriage. You simply chose not to listen." "I chose to prioritize your long-term security over your temporary feelings," Richard corrected. "Herbert Olson is a good match. Stable, respectable, financially secure. He would have provided well for you." "He would have provided for a woman he barely knew and had no interest in knowing better," Olivia said. "I would have been a trophy wife, father, an attractive accessory to show at business dinners and social functions." "Is that truly what you wanted for me?" Richard's jaw tightened. "I wanted you safe and settled. The world is not kind to unmarried women, Olivia. Without a husband to provide for you, your options are extremely limited." "I have found employment," Olivia said. "At the Cross T Ranch, helping manage the household. I am earning my own way, father." "Is that not what you always said you admired? Self-sufficiency and hard work." "Self-sufficiency for men," Richard said impatiently. "Olivia, you are a young woman from a good family. Working as a ranch servant is beneath your station. It is embarrassing." "To whom?" Olivia demanded, feeling anger rise to meet her anxiety. "To you. Because you find it embarrassing that your daughter would rather work honestly than marry for convenience. Or to your friends, who might judge you for failing to control me properly." "You have always been ungrateful," Richard said, his voice hardening. "I've given you every advantage. The finest education money could buy, introductions to the best families in Cheyenne. And you throw it all away to play at being a frontier woman. It is childish, Olivia." "It is my life," Olivia said fiercely. "Mine to live as I choose. You do not get to decide my path anymore, father. I am not a child." "Then stop acting like one," Richard snapped. "Come home. If you truly will not marry Herbert, I will accept that. But this foolishness of working on a ranch must end. You belong in Cheyenne, in society, making connections that will serve you well. There are other suitable men who would be better matches if Herbert does not appeal to you." Olivia felt something inside her shift and settle, crystallizing into certainty. "No," she said simply. "No." Richard's eyebrows rose. "That is all you have to say. No, I will not come home. No, I will not return to that life. No, I will not marry anyone I do not love simply because it would be convenient or respectable." Olivia straightened her shoulders. "I am staying at the Cross T Ranch. I am building a life there that has meaning and purpose. And if you cannot accept that, then we will simply have to agree that we want very different things." "I will cut you off completely," Richard said, playing his final card. "Not a penny of support, no inheritance. You will be entirely on your own." "I already am on my own," Olivia pointed out. "I have been managing without your money for 2 months now. It would certainly be easier with your support, but I can survive without it." Richard stared at her, his expression a mixture of frustration and something that might have been grudging respect. "You have truly changed. The Olivia I knew would never have spoken to me this way. The Olivia you knew was terrified of disappointing you. Olivia said quietly. I am still afraid of that, Father, but I am more afraid of living a life that makes me miserable just to earn your approval. You taught me to value integrity and honesty. I am simply applying those lessons to my own life. By working as a servant, Richard shook his head. Olivia, please be reasonable. At least come home for a visit. Let us discuss this properly, without the emotion of the moment clouding our judgment. There is nothing to discuss, Olivia said gently. I am not coming home, not now, not later. I am sorry that disappoints you, but my decision is made. She turned to leave, but her father's voice stopped her at the door. Is there a man? Olivia turned back slowly. What? You heard me. Is there a man involved in this decision? Some cowboy who has turned your head with romantic nonsense about the frontier? Olivia considered lying, then decided her father deserved at least this much honesty. There is a man, she admitted. The ranch foreman, Matthew Quinn. He is good and honest and treats me as an equal. But he is not the reason I am staying. I would be staying regardless, because I have found work that matters and a place where I am valued for who I am rather than who my father is. A ranch foreman, Richard repeated, his voice dripping with disdain. And what does this man make? $40 a month, $50 if he is exceptional? Olivia, you were raised in comfort. You have no idea what poverty means, what struggling to survive actually entails. Then I will learn, Olivia said firmly. Better to learn while building something real than to remain comfortable in a life that feels like a beautiful prison. She left before her father could respond, closing the door firmly behind her. Her hands were shaking and tears threatened, but she held them back through sheer force of will. She had done it. She had stood up to her father and refused to bend. Matthew and Sarah were waiting in the lobby exactly where she had left them. Matthew took one look at her face and was on his feet immediately, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. Are you all right? He asked, his hands coming up to frame her face, thumbs brushing away tears she had not realized were falling. I told him no, Olivia said, her voice breaking slightly. I told him I was staying, that I would not return to Cheyenne or marry someone I did not love, and he threatened to cut me off, and I told him that was his choice to make. Oh, sweetheart, Sarah said, embracing Olivia from behind so she was supported between them. I know that was hard, but you did the right thing. Did I? Olivia asked miserably. He is my father, the only family I have left, and I just walked away from him. He walked away from you when he prioritized his plans over your happiness, Matthew said firmly. You simply declined to follow him down that path. There is a difference. They stood like that for a moment, Olivia drawing strength from their support until she felt steady enough to continue. She pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Can we go home? She asked. I just want to go home. Of course, Matthew said, and the fact that he understood she meant the cross T rather than Cheyenne made her love him a little more. They were halfway to the buggy when Richard Crawford emerged from the hotel. He stopped on the boardwalk, taking in the tableau, his daughter standing between a cowboy and an older woman, clearly being supported by both. You must be Matthew Quinn, Richard said, his voice cold. Matthew's expression gave nothing away. I am, and you are Olivia's father. Nice to meet you, sir. The title held no respect, and Richard clearly knew it. Are you aware that my daughter was betrothed when she left Cheyenne, that she has broken her word to a respectable man? I am aware that your daughter was being forced into a marriage she did not want, Matthew replied calmly. Beyond that, her past is not my concern, only her future. And you think you can provide her with a future, Richard scoffed, on a foreman's wages. Living in some tiny cabin, working herself to exhaustion to help make ends meet. That is what you are offering my daughter. I am offering her respect and partnership, Matthew said. A life where her choices matter and her voice is heard. As for material comfort, we will build that together or we will do without. Either way, it will be on our terms. Noble sentiments from a man with nothing to offer, Richard said. Father, stop, Olivia interjected. Matthew is not the issue here. My choices are, and I have made them. Richard looked at his daughter, his expression harder than Olivia had ever seen it. Then, I suppose we have nothing further to discuss. You have made your position clear, and I have made mine. I will return to Cheyenne and inform Herbert Olson that the engagement is definitively ended. After that, you are on your own. I understand, Olivia said. Though the words hurt more than she had expected, Richard nodded curtly and returned to the hotel without looking back. Olivia stood watching his retreating form, feeling the finality of the moment settle over her. She had just severed her last tie to her old life, burned a bridge she would not be able to rebuild easily. Matthew took her hand, squeezing gently. Let us go home. The return journey was quiet, each of them lost in thought. Sarah dozed on and off, worn out by the emotional intensity of the day. Matthew drove with steady competence, one hand holding the reins, the other resting near Olivia's on the seat between them. Sometimes their fingers would brush, a small reassurance that she was not alone. As the sun set and the crossed T came into view, Olivia felt some of the tightness in her chest ease. This was home now, these people her family. She had made the right choice, even if that choice came with costs. Charles met them in the yard, his weathered face creasing with concern. How did it go? As well as could be expected, Sarah said, climbing down from the buggy. Olivia stood her ground. Her father was not happy, but he accepted her decision. More or less, Olivia added quietly. He made it clear I am no longer welcome in his life. Charles shook his head. His loss, then. You are welcome in ours for as long as you want to stay. That night, Olivia lay in bed staring at the ceiling, emotionally exhausted but strangely at peace. She had been terrified of her father's rejection for so long, had shaped her entire life around avoiding his disappointment. But now that the worst had happened, she found herself still intact, wounded perhaps, but not broken. She had Matthew and Sarah and Charles and work she found meaningful. She had her freedom and her self-respect. It would have to be enough. A soft knock at her door made her sit up. Come in. Matthew entered quietly, holding a lamp. I saw your light was still on. Could not sleep. Too much thinking, Olivia admitted. You should not be here. It is not proper. Nothing about our situation is proper by your father's standards, Matthew pointed out. But if you want me to leave, I will. Stay, Olivia said. Please. I could use the company. Matthew set the lamp on the small table and sat in the chair by the window, maintaining a respectable distance. Tell me what you are thinking. Olivia pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. That I am free for the first time in my life, and that freedom is more terrifying than I expected. Why terrifying? Matthew asked. Because now I have to figure out what to do with it, Olivia said. Before, I could blame my father for everything I was not or did not have. But now the only person responsible for my life is me. What if I make mistakes? What if I choose wrong? Then you will make mistakes and choose wrong, Matthew said practically. Everyone does. The difference is they will be your mistakes. You will learn from them and do better next time. Is that what you did? Olivia asked. After your parents died when you were on your own. I made every mistake a 15-year-old boy could make, Matthew said with a slight smile. Worked for people who cheated me, spent money on foolish things, took jobs I was not qualified for, but I learned. Eventually I figured out what mattered and what did not. You will too. What matters to you? Olivia asked softly. Matthew was quiet for a moment, his amber eyes reflecting the lamplight. Honest work, keeping my word, building something that lasts." He paused, then added, "And you matter to me, Olivia, more than is probably wise given how recently we met." "I feel the same way," Olivia admitted. "Which is probably also unwise." "Probably," Matthew agreed, "but I find I do not care about wisdom as much as I used to." They sat together in comfortable silence until Olivia's eyes grew heavy with exhaustion. Matthew rose to leave, then hesitated at the door. "For what it is worth, I am proud of you. What you did today took real courage." "Thank you," Olivia whispered, "for everything. I honestly do not know how I would have managed these past months without you." "You would have managed fine," Matthew said, "but I am glad you did not have to." After he left, Olivia extinguished the lamp and lay back down, feeling lighter than she had all day. Tomorrow she would wake up and return to work, building the life she had chosen. And Matthew would be there, steady and strong and choosing to walk that path alongside her. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. The next few months brought a routine that felt both new and timeless. Olivia settled fully into her role managing the household, her initial awkwardness giving way to competence, and then genuine skill. She learned to read the rhythms of the ranch, to anticipate needs before they arose, to manage resources with the efficiency required in a place where waste was not an option. Winter came early and hard to Wyoming, bringing snow that transformed the prairie into a white wilderness. The cattle were moved to protected valleys, the horses kept close to the barn, and the ranch work shifted to maintenance and preparation for spring. The men spent more time around the main compound, repairing equipment and tending to tasks that summer's busy schedule had postponed. This meant Olivia saw Matthew more frequently, and what had been careful courtship deepened into something more substantial. They stole moments together whenever possible. Early morning conversations over coffee before the household woke, evening walks when the weather permitted, quiet afternoons in the barn where Matthew taught her about horses, and she taught him about literature and history. They were careful about propriety, aware that Sarah and Charles were watching with benevolent interest. But everyone on the ranch could see what was developing between them, and the general sentiment was approval. Matthew was well liked, and Olivia had proven herself a hard worker who treated everyone with respect. The Cowboys began referring to her as the boss's lady, a title that made Matthew's ears turn red and Olivia laugh. Christmas came, and Sarah insisted on making it special despite the isolation. She and Olivia spent days baking, filling the house with the smells of gingerbread and cinnamon. Charles brought in an evergreen tree from the hills, and they decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments. On Christmas Eve, they invited all the ranch hands to the main house for dinner and celebration. It was a rowdy, joyful affair, with too much food and bad jokes and songs sung off-key. Watching Matthew laugh at one of Tommy's stories, his whole face transformed with genuine amusement, Olivia felt her heart swell with a happiness so intense it was almost painful. This was family, she realized. Not the family of blood and obligation she had left behind, but the family of choice and shared experience. Late that night, after the hands had returned to the bunkhouse and Charles and Sarah had retired, Matthew found Olivia on the porch. She was wrapped in a heavy shawl, watching the snow fall in the lamplight. "You should be inside," he said, draping his coat over her shoulders anyway. "It is freezing out here." "I wanted to think," Olivia said. "It has been quite a year." "Indeed it has," Matthew agreed, settling beside her on the porch bench. 6 months ago you were riding through the prairie with a lame horse. Now look at you." "Now look at us," Olivia corrected, slipping her hand into his. Matthew lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, a gesture that never failed to make her pulse quicken. "Olivia, I have been thinking about our situation." "That sounds ominous," Olivia said, trying to keep her tone light despite sudden nervousness. "Not ominous," Matthew assured her. "Just practical. We have been stepping carefully around this for months now, but I think we both know where this is headed, so I wanted to discuss possibilities." "What kind of possibilities?" Olivia asked. Matthew took a breath. "I have been saving money for years." "Nothing extravagant, but I have about $500 put away. Charles has mentioned several times that there is land available west of here, good grazing territory that could support a small herd. With my savings and a loan from the bank, I could potentially buy a section and start my own operation." Olivia's heart started beating faster. "Your own ranch." "Nothing like the Cross T," Matthew cautioned. "Just a few hundred acres to start, maybe 100 head of cattle. It would be hard work and we would have to build everything from scratch, but it would be ours." "Ours," Olivia repeated softly. Matthew turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the lamplight. "I am asking if you would consider being my wife. I know it is not what you are accustomed to. I cannot offer you luxury or even consistent comfort, especially at first. But I can offer you partnership and respect and a life we would build together, if that is something you would want." Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. "Are you proposing to me?" "I suppose I am," Matthew said with a slight smile. "Though not very romantically. I should probably be on one knee or something." He started to move, but Olivia stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Do not you dare. This is perfect exactly as it is. Is that a yes?" Matthew asked, his voice suddenly uncertain. "Yes," Olivia said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, of course yes. I would love nothing more than to build a life with you." Matthew pulled her into his arms, holding her close enough that she could hear his heart racing beneath his coat. "I cannot believe you actually said yes. I have been terrified to ask, worried you would realize you could do so much better." "There is no better," Olivia said fiercely. "Not for me. You are everything I want, Matthew Quinn. You always have been." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, a kiss that held promise and passion in equal measure. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard despite the cold air, Matthew rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably tell Charles and Sarah," he said. "Ask for their blessing." "In the morning," Olivia said. "Tonight let this just be ours." They sat together on the porch until the cold drove them inside, talking about possibilities and plans, about the ranch they would build and the life they would share. Olivia felt like she was glowing from within. Every dream she had not known she had suddenly taking shape and form. She had left Cheyenne seeking freedom and found love instead. Or perhaps, she thought, they were the same thing. The freedom to choose her own path had led her directly to the man she wanted to walk it with. The next morning, they told Charles and Sarah over breakfast. Sarah burst into tears and hugged them both, while Charles shook Matthew's hand with obvious approval. "About time," he said gruffly. "Been watching you two dance around each other for months. Glad you finally came to your senses." "We will need to give notice," Matthew said. "If we are going to start our own place, I should begin transitioning someone else into the foreman position. Maybe Tommy. He has learned a lot this year." "Tommy is a good choice," Charles agreed, "but there is no rush. Take the time to do this right. Besides, I am going to need both of you through the spring branding at minimum." They spent the rest of breakfast discussing practical matters, land options, financing, timelines. Sarah insisted they should have a proper wedding at the ranch with everyone invited. Olivia agreed gratefully, touched by her friend's enthusiasm. Later, while Olivia was washing dishes, Sarah joined her at the sink. "I am so happy for you both," she said warmly. Matthew is a good man. He will treat you well. I know, Olivia said. I never thought I could be this happy. 6 months ago, I was miserable in Cheyenne, trapped in a life I did not choose. Now I have everything I could have wanted. You chose well, Sarah said. Running away is not always the answer, but sometimes it is exactly what is needed. You had the courage to take that chance. I had no idea what I was doing, Olivia admitted. I was terrified. But you did it anyway, Sarah pointed out. That is what courage is, and look what came from that choice. Over the next few months, plans took shape. Matthew and Charles rode out to look at land, eventually settling on a section about 10 miles west of the crossed T. It had good water access and decent grass, with enough shelter to protect stock through the winter. The bank agreed to a loan based on Matthew's reputation and Charles's recommendation, and by early spring, the land was officially theirs. Construction began in April. Every hand on the crossed T volunteered to help during their off hours, and what would have taken Matthew months alone was accomplished in weeks. They built a simple cabin first, one room with a loft, solid and weatherproof if not elegant. Then came a barn and corrals, structures that would allow them to manage their initial small herd. Olivia divided her time between helping Sarah and preparing for her new home. She sewed curtains for the cabin windows and collected practical items, dishes and cookware, blankets and linens, all the small necessities of household management. Sarah was generous in her gifts, pressing surplus items on Olivia despite her protests. You helped me for months without asking for anything, Sarah said firmly. Let me do this. Besides, I am going to miss you terribly. At least let me make sure you are comfortable in your new home. The wedding was set for June, giving them time to finish the major construction and prepare properly. Sarah sent word to the neighboring ranches, and despite Olivia's expectation of a small affair, it seemed like half the county planned to attend. People like Matthew, Charles explained when Olivia expressed surprise. He has helped most of these folks at one time or another. They want to celebrate with him. The days leading up to the wedding were a blur of preparation and final construction. Matthew worked from dawn to dark, driven by a need to have everything perfect for Olivia. She helped when she could, learning to paint and sand and accomplish the dozen tasks that turned a simple structure into a home. One evening, standing in their completed cabin with paint still drying on the walls, Matthew pulled Olivia close. What do you think? Will it do? Olivia looked around the single room that would be their entire house for the foreseeable future. It was tiny compared to her father's house in Cheyenne, with rough-hewn furniture and simple finishes. But the walls were straight and solid, the roof was tight, and every board had been placed with care by the man she loved. It is perfect, she said honestly. It is ours. It is ours, Matthew agreed, kissing the top of her head, and we will build more. In a few years we can add rooms, maybe a proper dining room, a larger kitchen, whatever you want. I want exactly this, Olivia said. You, me, and a life we are building together. Everything else is just details. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, the sky that particular shade of endless blue unique to Wyoming. Sarah had helped Olivia alter a dress, transforming a simple day gown into something suitable for a wedding. It was not the elaborate creation Olivia would have worn in Cheyenne, but she loved it more for its practicality and the fact that she had helped create it. The ceremony took place in the yard of the Cross T, with a traveling preacher Charles had hired for the occasion. Cowboys cleaned up remarkably well, Olivia discovered, appearing in pressed shirts and combed hair for the event. She also met families from neighboring ranches, women who welcomed her warmly into their community. Matthew wore his best clothes, dark pants and a white shirt, his hair still damp from washing. When Olivia appeared from the house where she had been preparing, his expression transformed into something that made her knees weak. He looked at her like she was the most precious thing he had ever seen, like he could not quite believe his good fortune. The ceremony itself was brief and simple. They exchanged vows in front of their community, promising to love and support each other through whatever challenges came. When the preacher pronounced them married and Matthew kissed her, the assembled crowd cheered with genuine enthusiasm. The celebration lasted well into the night. Someone produced a fiddle, and couples danced in the yard while children ran wild and the women laid out enough food to feed an army. Olivia danced with Matthew, with Charles, with cowboys whose names she was still learning. She laughed until her sides ached and ate until she was stuffed and felt more purely happy than she had ever been in her carefully orchestrated Cheyenne life. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Matthew and Olivia slipped away. They rode together on his bay gelding, heading west toward their new home under a sky full of stars. Olivia sat in front of him, wrapped in his arms, feeling the solid warmth of his body against her back. Happy. Matthew murmured against her hair. Deliriously, Olivia replied. You, more than I have words for, Matthew admitted. I keep thinking I am going to wake up and discover this was all a dream. It is real, Olivia assured him, twining her fingers with his. We are real. Their cabin looked different in the darkness, more substantial somehow. Matthew lit lamps while Olivia stood in the center of the room, taking in their home. Flowers filled every available surface, gifts from Sarah and the other ranch women, filling the small space with color and sweet scent. I have something for you, Matthew said, pulling a small bundle from his saddlebag. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a folded piece of fabric. I know it is not much, but I wanted you to have something from me on our wedding day. Olivia took the bundle and unfolded it, then caught her breath. It was the saddle blanket Matthew had lent her that first day, the blue wool with red stripes that she had ridden on as he carried her to the cross tee. It had been washed and mended, the edges carefully bound with new fabric. Matthew, she whispered, running her hands over the soft wool. You kept it all this time. I thought about giving it back to you before the wedding, Matthew admitted. But I was not sure you would remember it, or if it would seem strange. But then I thought about everything that has happened because I stopped that day, because I lent you my blanket and brought you to the ranch. It seemed like it should mean something. It means everything, Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. This is the most romantic thing anyone has ever given me. She set the blanket aside carefully and moved into his arms, tilting her face up for his kiss. Matthew obliged, his lips warm and sure against hers, and Olivia felt desire kindle in her belly. They were married now, truly together, with nothing to keep them apart. What followed was tender and sweet, Matthew taking his time to make sure Olivia felt cherished and safe. After, lying tangled together in their marriage bed with the lamp burning low, Olivia felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. I have something for you too, she said suddenly, remembering. She slipped from bed and retrieved the bundle she had hidden in her trunk earlier. It is not quite as meaningful as yours, but I wanted you to have it. Matthew unwrapped the package to reveal a leather-bound journal, the kind used for keeping ranch records and accounts. The cover was embossed with his initials, done by a leather worker in Rawlins at Olivia's request. Inside, she had written on the first page, "The Quinn Ranch, established June 1878. Matthew and Olivia Quinn, proprietors, for recording our herd and expenses," Olivia explained. "Every successful ranch needs good records. And I wanted you to have something that acknowledged this is really ours, that we are building something that will last." Matthew traced the embossed letters with one finger, his expression unreadable. Then he pulled her back into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "I love you," he said roughly. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me." "I already know I will not," Olivia said. "You are everything I did not know I needed, Matthew Quinn. Everything and more." They made love again, slower this time, learning each other with hands and mouths and whispered words of love and promise. Outside, the Wyoming night sang with insects and distant coyotes, the sounds of a wilderness they were making their own. Olivia fell asleep wrapped in her husband's arms, the saddle blanket folded at the foot of their bed, and dreamed of the future they would build together. The first year of marriage was hard work tempered with moments of profound joy. They started with 50 head of cattle, a small herd that demanded constant attention. Matthew worked from before dawn until after dark, riding fence lines and checking water sources and managing the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. Olivia discovered that her household management skills transferred well to ranch bookkeeping, and she took over managing their finances with careful precision. Money was tight, as Matthew had predicted. There were unexpected expenses. A broken plow blade, veterinary care for a sick calf, supplies they had forgotten to budget for. But they managed, trimming where they could and taking pride in every small success. In December, Olivia realized she was pregnant. She told Matthew one evening after supper, nervous about his reaction. They had talked about children but agreed to wait until the ranch was more established. Life, apparently, had other plans. Matthew's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, concern, then pure joy. "A baby, we are having a baby. In June, I think," Olivia said. "I know the timing is not ideal." "The timing is perfect," Matthew insisted, pulling her into his arms. "Every timing is perfect for this. A baby, Olivia, our baby." His enthusiasm banished her nervousness, and they spent the evening making plans for the changes a child would require. They would need to expand the cabin, Matthew declared. Add a proper bedroom and a bigger kitchen. He could do most of the work himself during the winter when ranch work was slower. Sarah was thrilled when they told her, immediately taking Olivia under her wing with advice and practical assistance. She helped sew baby clothes and knit blankets, sharing stories of her own children's births and early years. The neighboring ranch women also rallied around, these frontier women who understood the challenges of raising children in harsh territory. Matthew attacked the cabin expansion with focused determination, adding a bedroom that would eventually be the baby's and enlarging the main living space. He worked in the evenings after completing his ranch duties, often by lamplight, driven by a need to provide properly for his growing family. "You are going to exhaust yourself," Olivia protested one night, watching him sand boards at 9 o'clock. "I am fine," Matthew insisted. "I want this done before the baby comes. Our child deserves a proper home. Our child deserves a father who is not too tired to hold them," Olivia pointed out. "Matthew, you are already working 18-hour days. The cabin is fine. We can finish the expansion after the birth if needed." But Matthew was stubborn, and the walls went up steadily despite Olivia's concerns. By March, the expansion was complete, and Olivia had to admit it made an enormous difference. They actually had space now, room to move and breathe and grow. Spring brought the busiest time on a ranch, calving season and branding. Matthew hired 2 temporary hands to help with the work, young cowboys looking for experience. Olivia managed the cooking for the crew, rising before dawn to prepare huge meals that fueled their long days. It was exhausting work, especially as her pregnancy advanced, but Olivia found she thrived on the challenge. She liked the sense of accomplishment that came from feeding hungry men and keeping the household running smoothly. She liked being essential to the ranch's success, a full partner in the enterprise rather than an ornamental addition. One evening in early June, Olivia felt the first pains of labor. Matthew, who had faced down dangerous cattle and brutal weather without flinching, went pale and shaky. "I am getting Sarah," he announced, "and the doctor from Rawlins and maybe Charles. Should I get Charles? What do you need?" "You need to calm down," Olivia said, breathing through a contraction. "And yes, please get Sarah. But Matthew, the doctor is hours away. This baby is not going to wait." Sarah arrived within the hour, blessedly calm and competent. She had assisted at dozens of births and knew exactly what to do. She sent Matthew away with instructions to boil water and tear clean sheets into strips, tasks designed more to keep him occupied than because they were essential. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Olivia discovered that all her strength and determination were barely enough to endure the relentless waves of pain. But Sarah talked her through it, encouraging and soothing, and eventually, as the sun climbed toward noon, their baby entered the world. "A boy," Sarah announced, placing the squalling infant on Olivia's chest. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Olivia stared at her son, overwhelmed with love so intense it bordered on pain. He was perfect, with dark hair and Matthew's amber eyes and tiny fists that waved furiously. She touched his cheek with one trembling finger and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "Can I come in?" Matthew's voice from outside the bedroom door sounded desperate. "Come meet your son," Olivia called, her voice hoarse from exertion. Matthew entered hesitantly, as if afraid he might break something. But when he saw Olivia holding their baby, his face transformed. He knelt beside the bed, touching the infant's head with infinite gentleness. "He is so small," Matthew whispered. "He is perfect," Olivia corrected. "We made him, Matthew. We created this tiny person." They decided to name him James after Matthew's father. James Matthew Quinn, born June 18, 1879, on a ranch his parents had built from nothing. Sarah cried when they told her the name, touched to have been part of this moment. The weeks after James's birth were a blur of sleeplessness and learning. Olivia had read about infant care, but discovered that reality was far messier and more complicated than any book suggested. James was a hungry baby who rarely slept for more than a few hours at a time, and Olivia spent her nights nursing and rocking and wondering if she would ever feel fully rested again. Matthew helped as much as he could, walking the floor with James when Olivia needed rest, changing diapers without complaint, taking over household tasks so she could focus on the baby. Watching him with their son made Olivia fall in love with him all over again. He was so gentle despite his size, so patient with the tiny human who demanded so much. "You are a natural," she told him one evening, watching him rock James to sleep. "I am terrified I will drop him," Matthew admitted. "He is so small and fragile." "You will not drop him," Olivia assured him. "And he is stronger than he looks. Babies are resilient." As summer progressed, they settled into a new routine that accommodated their son. James came with Olivia as she worked around the house and yard, sleeping in a basket while she cooked or did laundry. Sometimes Matthew would take him in a sling while doing lighter ranch work, the baby strapped to his chest as he moved among the cattle. The neighboring families visited frequently, bringing gifts and advice. Olivia learned that the frontier community took care of its own, that isolation bred a kind of fierce loyalty among those who understood the challenges of this life. One afternoon, in late August, a buggy rolled into their yard bearing an unexpected visitor. Olivia was hanging laundry when she heard the approach and turned to see a well-dressed older woman climbing down with the driver's assistance. It took her a moment to recognize her Aunt Margaret from Rock Springs, the aunt she had originally planned to seek out over a year ago. Olivia had written to her about the marriage and James's birth, but had not expected an actual visit. "Aunt Margaret," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "What a surprise!" "Olivia," her aunt replied, taking in the modest cabin and dusty yard with sharp eyes. "I had to see for myself how you were managing. Your letters made this all sound quite pastoral, but I needed to judge the reality." Olivia felt defensive heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice calm. "Would you like to come inside? I can make tea." Inside the cabin, Margaret's inspection continued. She examined everything from the simple furniture to the curtains to James, sleeping peacefully in his cradle. Her expression gave nothing away, and Olivia found herself growing increasingly nervous under that assessing gaze. "You have done well," Margaret said finally, settling at the table. "Better than I expected when you wrote to say you had married a ranch foreman." "Matthew is a wonderful husband," Olivia said firmly, "and we own this ranch together. It may not be much yet, but it is ours." "I can see that," Margaret said. "I also heard from your father." Olivia's heart sank. "Oh," he wrote asking if I had heard from you, if I knew whether you were safe and healthy. "I thought you should know that he has been worried despite your estrangement." "He made his choice," Olivia said quietly. "I invited him to accept my decisions. He chose not to." "Pride is a powerful thing," Margaret observed, "on both sides. But Olivia, life is short and family is precious. I am not saying you should compromise your happiness for his approval. But perhaps you might consider letting him know about his grandson." The suggestion caught Olivia off guard. She had been so focused on building her new life that she had not thought much about her father in recent months. The anger had faded, leaving behind a kind of sadness for the relationship they might have had. "I will think about it," Olivia said finally. Margaret stayed for 3 days, and Olivia found herself enjoying her aunt's company more than she had expected. Margaret was practical and straightforward, with none of the stuffiness Olivia associated with her Cheyenne social circle. She helped with household tasks, gave solid advice about managing both ranch accounts and infant care, and told stories about Olivia's mother that her father had never shared. "Your mother was fierce," Margaret said one evening. "When people told her she could not do something, she did it twice just to prove them wrong. You are very much like her, Olivia. She would have been proud of you." The words made Olivia's eyes sting. "I wish I remembered her better." "I was only 5 when she died." "She loved you enormously," Margaret assured her, "and she would have loved this life you have built. She married your father because she loved him, but I always thought she found society constraining. She would have thrived out here." When Margaret left, she pressed an envelope into Olivia's hands. "For James," she said. "A little something to help with expenses. And Olivia, write to your father. You do not have to reconcile completely, but let him know he has a grandson. Give him that chance." After her aunt's departure, Olivia thought long and hard about the suggestion. She discussed it with Matthew, who characteristically left the decision entirely to her while offering his support either way. "He is your father," Matthew said, "and James's grandfather. If you want to reach out, I will support that. If you prefer to maintain the distance, that is fine too." In the end, Olivia wrote a brief letter. She did not apologize for her choices or invite her father to visit, but she did inform him of James's birth and included a photograph Sarah had arranged to have taken when a traveling photographer passed through. It was an olive branch of sorts, extended without compromising her independence. She received a response 3 weeks later. Her father's letter was stiff and formal, but beneath the carefully controlled language, Olivia detected genuine emotion. He acknowledged his grandson, expressed hope that James was healthy and growing well, and mentioned that he had established a bank account in the boy's name with a modest initial deposit. There was no apology for his previous harshness, but there was also no renewed attempt to control her life. It was enough, Olivia decided. A beginning, perhaps, toward eventual reconciliation, but on her terms in her own time. The years that followed brought steady growth and increasing prosperity. The ranch expanded from 50 head to 200, requiring them to hire permanent hands. They built a larger barn and added more rooms to the cabin, which was gradually becoming a proper house. Olivia's bookkeeping revealed that they were not just surviving but actually building equity, creating something that would last. James grew into a sturdy toddler and then a curious child, learning to ride almost as soon as he could walk. He followed Matthew everywhere, a small shadow determined to learn everything about ranch work. Watching them together, father and son working side by side, filled Olivia with a contentment she had never imagined possible. In 1881, they had a daughter, Emma, who arrived with less drama than her brother but equal amounts of love. 2 years later came another son, Thomas. Their household was full of noise and chaos and laughter, the cabin ringing with children's voices and the endless activity of family life. The ranch continued to prosper. By 1885, they ran 500 head of cattle and had purchased additional land, expanding their holdings to nearly 3 full sections. They built a proper house to replace the original cabin, with separate bedrooms for the children and a spacious kitchen where Olivia could work comfortably. Matthew had been right about one thing. Building a life took more than desire. It took unrelenting hard work, careful planning, and the ability to weather setbacks. They faced droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and market fluctuations. But they faced them together, partners in every sense of the word. One evening in the spring of 1886, Matthew found Olivia on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and orange. The children were in bed, the ranch hands settled in their bunks, and for a moment everything was peaceful. "Tired?" Matthew asked, settling beside her. "Pleasantly so," Olivia replied, leaning into his warmth. "I was thinking about that day you found me on the prairie, almost 9 years ago now." "Best day of my life," Matthew said immediately. "Finding you changed everything." "You changed everything," Olivia corrected. "You lent me your saddle blanket and I fell in love with you." "I am not sure the blanket was the deciding factor," Matthew said with a smile, "but I am glad it worked." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden past?" Olivia asked. "If you had not stopped that day?" "Never," Matthew said firmly. "Because you are here now and this is our life. That is all that matters." Olivia thought about the journey that had brought her here. The desperate flight from Cheyenne, the terrifying moment when her mare went lame, the dust cloud on the horizon that became Matthew Quinn and salvation. She thought about the proposal her father had offered, the life of comfort and constraint she had refused, and she thought about what she had chosen instead: work and partnership, struggle and triumph, love that had been tested and proven true. "I have something for you," she said suddenly, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "I have been saving it for the right moment." Matthew unfolded the paper curiously. It was the deed to their ranch, officially recorded at the county courthouse. But someone had added something to it recently, and Matthew's breath caught as he read the new notation. "You added your inheritance to the ranch deed," he said, his voice rough. "Olivia, that money was yours, from your aunt for you personally." "It was mine," Olivia agreed. Margaret had passed away the previous year, leaving Olivia a surprising sum in her will. And I chose to invest it in our ranch, in our future. This is my proposal, Matthew Quinn. We started with your savings and your dream. Now we build the rest together, equal partners in everything." Matthew pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "You did not have to do this." "I know," Olivia said, "but I wanted to. You gave me your saddle blanket all those years ago, a simple gift that became the foundation of everything. This is my gift to you, to us, to the life we are building for our children." They sat together as the stars emerged, watching the land they had built together stretch away into the distance. Somewhere in the barn, horses moved in their stalls. In the house behind them, their children slept peacefully. And on the prairie, cattle grazed under the watchful eye of the hands they employed. It was not the life Olivia had been raised to expect, but it was the life she had chosen. Every morning, she woke grateful for that desperate decision to flee Cheyenne, for the lame mare that had stranded her, for the cowboy who had stopped when he could have ridden past. Matthew Quinn had lent her his saddle blanket on a dusty September day, a simple gesture of kindness that had changed both their lives. And Olivia had returned it with a proposal of her own, not just partnership in a ranch, but partnership in life, in love, in building something that would outlast them both. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of challenge and joy. The children grew, taking on increasing responsibilities around the ranch. James showed his father's natural way with cattle and horses, while Emma proved to have her mother's head for numbers and organization. Thomas, the youngest, had a gift for finding the humor in any situation, keeping the family laughing even through difficult times. By 1890, the Quinn Ranch was one of the most successful operations in the region, respected for quality stock and fair dealing. Matthew served on various cattlemen's association boards, his judgment valued by his peers. Olivia had become a pillar of the local community, organizing school fundraisers and helping new settlers adjust to frontier life. The estrangement with her father had softened over the years into something approaching reconciliation. Richard Crawford never quite forgave his daughter for rejecting his plans, but he developed a genuine fondness for his grandchildren during occasional visits. And watching Matthew work, seeing the respect he commanded and the success he had built from nothing, even Richard had to admit his daughter had chosen well. One warm afternoon, in June 1895, the Quinn family gathered for a special celebration. It was Matthew and Olivia's 17th wedding anniversary, and the ranch hands had organized a surprise party. The entire community turned out, bringing food and music and genuine affection for the couple who had built not just a successful ranch, but a true home. As the party wound down and guests began departing, Olivia found the old saddle blanket Matthew had given her so long ago. She had kept it all these years, carefully preserved, a tangible reminder of where their story began. On impulse, she brought it outside to where Matthew stood watching the sunset. "You remember this?" she asked, unfolding the faded blue wool with its red stripes. Matthew smiled, that warm expression that still made her heart skip. "How could I forget? That blanket witnessed the beginning of everything." "I have been thinking," Olivia said. "We should pass it down to James. Tell him the story of how we met, how his father stopped to help a stranger and changed both our lives." "I like that idea," Matthew agreed. "Though I am not sure he will appreciate the romance of it yet. He is at that age where his parents' love story is mostly embarrassing." Olivia laughed. "He will understand eventually. When he meets someone who makes him willing to risk everything, he will understand." They stood together in the golden light, the blanket folded between them, surrounded by the life they had built. 3 children, a successful ranch, a community they had helped shape. It had not been easy, but nothing worthwhile ever was. You ever regret it? Matthew asked quietly. Walking away from your father's world, all that comfort and security. Olivia turned to face him fully, taking both his hands in hers. Not for a single second. That life was never really mine, Matthew. This is mine. You are mine, and I am yours. That is worth more than all the security money could buy. Matthew kissed her softly, a gentle affirmation of 17 years of partnership and love. I am the luckiest man alive, he said, to have found you, to have built this life with you. Everything good in my world started the day I lent you that blanket. And everything good in mine started when I accepted it, Olivia replied. As the sun set on their 17th anniversary, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of orange and gold, Matthew and Olivia Quinn stood together on the porch of their house, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and their love. The blanket that had begun it all rested in Olivia's hands, a simple piece of wool that represented so much more. Kindness between strangers, the courage to choose your own path, and the quiet persistence required to build something that lasts. Their story had started with a lame horse and a generous cowboy on an empty prairie. It had grown through hard work and harder choices, through love tested by poverty and doubt but never broken. And it would continue through their children and their children's children, a legacy not just of land and cattle but of partnership and respect and choosing love over convenience. The saddle blanket, faded and worn but carefully preserved, would remind future generations that sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes, and that true love is built not in a single romantic moment, but in thousands of small choices to support and respect and cherish the person beside you. As the stars emerged and the night grew cool, Matthew and Olivia went inside to their family, their home, their life. A life that had begun with borrowed wool and grown into something neither could have imagined that dusty September day so long ago. They had found each other in the vast emptiness of the Wyoming territory, two people seeking different things but finding exactly what they needed. And from that chance meeting, they had built not just a ranch but a love story for the ages, one that would be told and retold, inspiring others to have the courage to choose their own paths and trust in the kindness of strangers. The saddle blanket hung now in a place of honor, a reminder that sometimes the most precious gifts come wrapped in the simplest packages, and that love, like the frontier itself, requires both courage and faith to claim fully. Matthew and Olivia Quinn had both, and they had used them to create something beautiful and enduring, a legacy that would outlast any fortune her father could have provided. Their love story, born from one cowboy's generosity and one woman's brave choice to accept it, had proven that the best proposals are not always spoken with words but demonstrated through actions, through showing up day after day to build something together, through being willing to risk everything for the chance to live authentically and love completely. And that lesson, like the blanket that symbolized it, would be passed down through generations, inspiring others to be brave enough to lend kindness to strangers and wise enough to recognize love when it appears on the horizon, coming to rescue you from a future that was never truly yours to claim.